Welcome back. The panel is here. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and Chief Washington Correspondent. Ryan Nobles, NBC News Chief Capitol Hill Correspondent. Neera Tanden, President and CEO of the Center for American Progress, and Marc Short, former Trump Director of Legislative Affairs. Thank you all for being here on an incredibly busy Sunday. Andrea, let me start with you. I know you've been working your sources on this 20-point plan of the president's. You heard what the Secretary of State had to say. Where do you see this going from here? Could this, in fact, be the end of the war in Gaza?
Potentially. This is such a big deal. Look, if they get the hostages out, as the Secretary said, that is the top priority. But then comes the hard part. You've got Hamas that has not agreed to disarm. You've got Israel, which has not set a timetable for withdrawal and is now taking more land from Gaza in a buffer zone than anyone had contemplated. So all of this is to be negotiated. They are now in Egypt negotiating. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and talking to Hamas. Hamas is divided between the military and the political branches. But the important thing is that Hamas is now really isolated. The Arab countries all came together in New York when they were here for the UN meetings with the president. That is a huge factor. And partly that's because of Israel's biggest mistake, which was to attack Qatar. This united the Arab world. It infuriated President Trump. For the first time, we're seeing President Trump really putting pressure on Netanyahu to stop the bombing. When he said that, it was very significant. So this could be transformational. And, you know, if this were to work out and it would be the Abraham Accords, it would be recognition of Israel, transform the whole region, and President Trump would deserve that Nobel Prize.
Wow.
It
was certainly, it's something that he has certainly, according to folks who are close to him, has been eyeing. Mark, Andrea makes, I think, a really critical point here, which is that after Israel targeted Hamas in Qatar, there was that backlash. President Trump was infuriated. He had Prime Minister Netanyahu call the Qataris to apologize. What does this moment say about the state of the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Well, as Andrea said, this could be a giant breakthrough, and I think the president has stood behind Israel throughout both his first and second term and deserves credit for that. But there is strain there. I mean, the reality is, we have to keep in mind, the reality that the reason the bombing happened is because Qatar has housed Hamas and terrorists before. That's the only reason there was a bombing there in the first place. And so, as you look through this deal, I think there's a lot that still has to play out. It's giving up 1,700 terrorist hostages from Israel, basically creating a potential pathway to statehood because of an invasion 2 years ago that slaughtered Israelis. There's a lot here that still has to play out.
No doubt. We're going to track every twist and turn closely, as we are tracking every twist and turn here in Washington. Ryan Nobles, with that, I turn to you. We heard from the Speaker of the House. We heard from the Minority Leader. Both sides seem as dug in as ever this morning. Where are we in this battle to reopen the government?
Well, I think it says something that the closest these two men have gotten to talking in a room is through your show this morning, Kristen. They're debating about this in public. They're not having serious negotiations behind closed doors, and that's why I think the shutdown is going to take a little bit longer than anybody had originally anticipated. The biggest thing right now is about the moderate Democrats in the Senate, right? They were the ones that broke in the spring. I remember standing outside of a room on Capitol Hill where we literally heard them screaming at each other as to whether or not they should hold ground and stand up to Donald Trump. That's not happening now. That moderate middle is holding. It could have something to do with the fact that folks like Gary Peters, Jeanne Shaheen are not running for re-election. They can stand up to Trump without consequence. But right now, Democrats are unified, and that's why this shutdown is going to continue.
Neera, will they continue to hold? You have Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of the progressive base of the Democratic Party cheering on Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. But to Ryan's point, it's all about the moderates in the middle.
Absolutely, and I think the moderates see a world in which the Wall Street Journal has leaks that Donald Trump and the White House are concerned about the premium tax credits. Josh Hawley, they're concerned that they have to actually deal with this problem. Josh Hawley puts out quotes basically saying Republicans have to deal with this. And Senator Thune's position is, and as you heard, Mike Johnson's, we'll deal with this, but actually after people get their notices. And I think that's what's so odd about this posture, because honestly, this is a real problem people are facing. People have talked about the fact that 75% of the people who are going to get the real shocks are in Republican states, and they are seeing at the very least doubling of their premiums. And I think fundamentally this is a cost of living issue, and the American people want it solved.
Marc, a majority of people are saying they want to see these Obamacare tax credits extended. To what extent is that a pressure point on the White House?
Well, look, I think sadly Republicans are going to cave on this in the end.
You do?
Of course. The bottom line, Kristen, is that, look, the Democrats are really shrewd when they put the Obamacare subsidies in the plan. They bought off insurance companies to support Obamacare. No surprise, when government takes over health care, prices go up. And so here we are, 100% increase in prices, and basically you have Democrats and Republicans are going to, opposed to putting free market reforms. Eventually they're going to do this, but Democrats caused the shutdown. But can I also say in an interview with Leader Jeffries that can we stop with the pearl-clutching about the mean tweets and sombrero tweets, that this week it came to light that a Democrat candidate for Attorney General of the State of Virginia called for the assassination of a political opponent, called for the assassination of that political opponent's family, and there's not one national Democrat calling for him to step aside. Not one. It's disgraceful.
Nira, let me let you respond to that, because that is going to be a big story, I think, in the coming days.
I mean,
and then we'll go to Andrea.
I absolutely think people should criticize that 100%. I think it was a private conversation he had, but still awful and disgusting. Wasn't calling for it public, but terrible. And
it should be condemned.
It should be condemned. But then we should condemn that. But then you should condemn when the president calls the Democratic Party the party of Satan.
Yeah, in all fairness.
Why don't we just say both of those things?
I think I've paid the price for saying for political violence on our side.
But yeah, I agree with that. But let's criticize other Republicans or the president.
I think I
for not saying
But
Satan.
the fact that not one Democrat has stood out when he called for a political assassination, this moment of political violence, is crazy.
Andrea, talk about this is the fraught backdrop against which they're trying to reopen the government.
Well, first of all, they're not talking, and I've never seen a shutdown in, how many decades have we seen shutdowns where they don't even talk, and that is not acceptable. But I don't think the Democrats are going to cave on this, because their view is the president is already violating previous precedent in the Supreme Court by taking appropriated money and moving it around and firing people and shutting down departments. So the threat to fire, which I thought would be the real nuclear weapon on the part of the administration, isn't working, because Democratic workers are saying we're being fired anyway.
10 seconds left.
This is all about Donald Trump. When Donald Trump decides that he doesn't want to deal with the shutdown anymore, he runs the Republican Senate and House right now. If he says, guys, make a deal, they will make a deal. We'll just see how long it will take to get there.
Mike Johnson should worry
about it. We will indeed. Guys, great conversation. Thank you. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back next week, because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.